The $10,000 threshold. It usually starts quietly. Not with panic, not with sirens, just a ceiling. Dark, unmoving. You're awake far earlier than you need to be, replaying scenarios that haven't happened yet, a strange kind of rehearsal. The car making a sound it shouldn't, an email that starts with, "We need to talk," a bill you didn't plan for. Nothing is actually wrong, but your body doesn't know that. This is what financial stress feels like. Not drama, pressure. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. That pressure doesn't disappear when you earn more. It disappears when you cross a specific threshold. Not 1 million, not 6 figures, not even close. It starts much lower than that. Because money doesn't change your life all at once. It changes how your brain experiences reality, in steps. And the first step is around $10,000. Before that number, life feels reactive. After it, something subtle but permanent shifts. Let me explain why.
It's unrelenting.
When you have no buffer, every decision carries weight. Not metaphorical weight, actual cognitive load. Your brain is constantly running calculations in the background. Can I afford this? What if something breaks? What happens if I say no? This isn't about being irresponsible, it's about bandwidth. Scarcity, real or perceived, narrows attention. Psychologists call this tunneling. When resources are limited, the mind fixates on immediate threats and loses access to long-term thinking. That's why people under financial pressure don't plan, not because they don't care, because they literally can't. Their mental energy is consumed by defense. $10,000 changes that. Not because you spend it, but because you don't have to. At that point, most everyday problems stop feeling existential. They downgrade from crisis to inconvenience. A repair isn't a catastrophe. A delay isn't a disaster. A bad month isn't the end. And that downgrade matters more than almost anything else. Because stress isn't just uncomfortable, it's expensive. Chronically elevated stress hormones impair decision-making, memory, sleep, and impulse control, which means the more stressed you are about money, the worse your financial decisions become. It's a feedback loop, and it traps people for years. Crossing the first real savings threshold breaks that loop. Suddenly, you're not making choices to avoid pain. You're making choices to improve position. That's the pivot. This is where most conversations about money go wrong. They focus on outcomes, cars, houses, status. But money's real power shows up much earlier in how it changes your posture toward the world. When you have no buffer, you lean forward, always bracing. When you have a buffer, you stand upright. That posture shift affects everything. Negotiation, risk tolerance, patience. You stop accepting bad deals just to survive. You stop saying yes out of fear. You gain the ability to pause. And pause is power. Here's the part most people miss. The benefit doesn't scale linearly. The difference between 0 and 10,000 is far greater than the difference between 10,000 and 20. Why? Because $10,000 covers the category of events that derail lives. Most financial disasters aren't actually large, they're just unplanned. A few thousand for a repair, a medical bill, a few months of income interruption. Once those are neutralized, your mind exits survival mode, and that unlocks a different kind of thinking. You stop obsessing over expenses and start noticing leverage. Courses, relocation, skill upgrades, time. You begin asking better questions, not "can I afford this?" but "is this worth it?" That's when money starts behaving less like fuel and more like a tool. This is also why income alone doesn't create security. You've seen it, people earning impressive salaries but living paycheck to paycheck. High cash flow, zero margin. They feel just as trapped as someone earning far less. Because margin, not income, is what creates stability. $10,000 is often the first real margin people experience, and once someone experiences margin, they rarely go back. Because it changes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who barely keeps up. You become someone who prepares. That identity shift compounds. You start optimizing without force. Saving stops feeling like restriction and starts feeling like alignment. Not, I can't spend this, but I don't need to. This is why the first 1,000 is the hardest. It requires friction against an old identity. By the time someone reaches 5,000 or 6,000, the behavior is already encoded. At 10, it's reinforced. There's also a social dimension people don't talk about. Financial stress leaks into conversations, into body language, into relationships. People under pressure avoid situations. They withdraw. They compromise boundaries. Security restores presence. You listen better. You negotiate differently. You walk away when something isn't right. Not because you're arrogant, because you're not desperate. And desperation is visible. Employers sense it. Salespeople exploit it. Life penalizes it. $10,000 doesn't make you confident. It removes fear. And that difference matters. Now let's be clear. This number doesn't make you wealthy. It doesn't free you from work. It doesn't buy luxury. What it buys is time and mental quiet. Enough quiet to think strategically. Enough time to respond instead of react. That's why people who reach this point often accelerate afterward. Not because money magically multiplies, but because they finally have the space to play offense. They see opportunities others miss. They invest where others hesitate. They can wait. And waiting is one of the underrated financial skills there is. Here's the irony. The people who think $10,000 is insignificant are usually the ones who have already passed it. They forget what life felt like before. Before every purchase required justification. Before every emergency felt personal. Before sleep was interrupted by numbers. This threshold doesn't show up in flashy advice. It doesn't trend. It doesn't sell dreams. But it quietly divides lives. On one side, constant vigilance, mental exhaustion, short-term thinking. On the other, stability, optionality, momentum. And once you cross it, you understand why people say money doesn't buy happiness, but lack of it buys anxiety. If you're far from this number, the goal isn't obsession, it's direction. Consistency beats intensity. Identity beats tactics. Because the real transformation isn't the balance, it's the person who can hold it. And once that person exists, larger numbers stop feeling abstract. They feel inevitable. So the question isn't, how do I get rich? It's simpler. What would change if your life stopped feeling fragile? And what kind of decisions would you make if you weren't constantly bracing for impact? That's the threshold. That's the shift. And once you cross it, you don't just have money, you have room.